If all of that noise is happening, just take a moment and be kind to yourself. Like, tell yourself that what you're going through is difficult, that you showed up, that you're showing up here, and give yourself some compassion to know that, like, that we all have it and that that's okay and that there's nothing wrong with you. And it's really just starting with, like, what's might seem very simple, but starting there.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Mind Triumph podcast, the mental health podcast based in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Here, we are not shy to take a look at the mental health topic from every angle, but one that we are particularly interested in is that inner critic, inner voice that we all share that we call the talker. Now, I'm not important in this conversation. It's all really about the guests, these wonderful human beings that bring exceptional stories, tools, techniques, the professional practice experience from the world of mental health to hopefully possibly help us improve our mental health. Now, our conversations are unique in that they're not scripted. They're never scripted. They're authentic. They're organic. And as I said, our guests bring us in their world and anything that they can share that can help with our mental health and maybe possibly improve our relationship with the inner talker or let go of it altogether. Who knows? Now, today's guest is an exceptional individual, and I'm really dying to get into the conversation in the next 1 hour with Sabrina. Sabrina brings warmth, skill, deep integrity to the work of mental wellness and healing. She's a registered therapeutic counselor, certified in both, and Sabrina will correct me if I'm wrong, but both traumatic stress studies and addiction and care treatment. She helps people move from, let's say, overwhelmed and emotional pain to peace, resilience, and self-compassion. I am really looking forward to getting to this conversation. It's an enormous honor to have you on our podcast. Welcome, Sabrina.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
That's wonderful. And for the viewers, you see Sabrina's big smile. It'll be a very wonderful conversation coming up. But as we usually start with a very open-ended and big question, Sabrina, can you tell us a bit about yourself? And most importantly, how did you get into the field of healing? That's a word that we use, but healing and mental wellness and health.
Hmm. I came into it, I guess, from my own lived experience, from my own personal background, on my own healing journey, if you will, dealing with my own past trauma, my own mental health, and my journey to healing and recovery and all of that. So I really wanted to help others on their path. And that's how I came to it, really. That's my background. Yeah.
Is it true that most every, let's say, good practitioner, solid practitioner comes kind of from the same path? They have there's something in their life happened through their
Mhm.
personal journey that kind of pushed them to pursue that career. Is that common?
I would say so. I think we, like, have this, like, human need to understand, like, ourselves better, and then when we overcome something, then the service part of us wants to give that back to others, and I think a lot of psychotherapists and counselors have that sorta history, yeah.
Can you be a good one without going through something yourself? Or maybe more importantly, healing through something? Because you could have it in your life, like a trauma or stress or anxiety, but if you haven't healed it,
Mhm.
can you be a good practitioner without having done that work?
Say, it's not 100% necessary, but I think it does allow you to understand your clients a lot better. Like, you know where they've been, and because you've been there, so you have a lot more compassion and understanding and awareness of what your clients are going through, and I think that sort of empathy and attunement really helps you as a psychotherapist. And so if you haven't sort of tapped into that in any capacity in your own life, then it might be hard to have that empathy and that attunement with your clients.
I totally agree. I mean, I think that probably goes with almost everything we do. If it's something that is lived experience or we are doing it ourselves, whatever it might be, like the people on the other side, they know you believe in it, you own it, right? And it's a
Mhm.
different kind of relationship than, like I always joke, if advertising a product, but you don't look anything like what the product suggests that you would be, it's probably not going to go far, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Percent. What were your career aspirations before that? Like as you were growing up, were you hoping to be a doctor or something else, and then kind of trajectory changed?
Yeah. So for the first chapter of my career, I was actually in performing arts. But I think in some ways it's quite like there's similarity. I was a director and a facilitator and a sort of in a leadership role uh, in my past career. I had a theater company, and it was a lot about understanding like what are people's motivations? What do they want? What is your audience? How do you connect with your audience? How do you connect with the actors or the participants or the other creatives that I worked with. So it's a lot of psychology, right? So I think there are lots of parallels. I mean, it is a very different industry. Like it's very different, but I think that's kind of like the through line for me is being really curious and interested about people and their stories and their challenges
Yes.
and their, yeah,
Wonderful.
motivation.
But don't we all have stories? But as you were speaking about it, and I hope you don't mind, I want to go into that world a little bit. I mean, performing, as you said, had a theater or directing. I mean, these people,
Mhm.
first word that comes to my mind is eclectic. You have like this group of people that they're the performers, right? Artists. Like you said, what does it take to manage this kind of individuals? I mean, it seems like, yeah, like take us into the world.
You have to have very similar like attunement to people, like and being empathetic and really being like, okay, what does this person need versus, what does this person need? Because no two individuals are the same. And how do I navigate everybody's what they need from me as a director or as a producer or in a rehearsal room and bring them all together and like create a cohesive team and a cohesive unit that we can all move forward together. So, yeah,
It's
lots of listening, lots of empathy, lots of compassion, very similar.
How long were you in that career or that you did that?
Gosh, over 15 years,
Wow,
nearly 20.
that's a good chunk of time. It's almost 2 decades. What did you
Yes.
learn? I mean, I'm asking you to summarize 20 years in a few minutes, but can you tell us a few things you learned from that career worth sharing?
Yes. Well, one, what I sort of mentioned before, which is like everybody has a story and it's all different. Everybody has been through something, everybody has fears, everybody has what we'll be talking about later, their own like mental inner critic, the own,
Yes.
we all have that. Yeah, so I would say like that's the one thing that I've learned. And then two, really practically, like how to be a good leader, how to be a good facilitator, how to run a business. Very practical tools, which all also still apply.
If you went back in time, would you do it again or would you do it differently, I guess?
No, I think for me, I very much have the philosophy that that everything that I've done up to this point or up to really led me in the direction to where I am now. So I don't think I would be here doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't gone through all of that and done all of those things as well.
Everything that we go through kind of shapes us who we are today.
Absolutely. My belief. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So there you are, 15, 20 years in that business, and all of a sudden a change,
Hmm.
right? So
Hmm.
I mean, you can be as detailed as you want to be, but like that must have been that it's not a decision that you take in 5 minutes. It's a process, right? And then can you walk us through of how some of that happened and the challenges and obviously the exciting part of starting something new, I guess.
Sure, yeah. So like I kind of had two parallel journeys, I guess. One is my professional career that, as I worked in the performing arts and did all of that. And then I also was on like a personal journey as well and dealing with my own, past trauma and mental health issues, depression, anxiety, many different things at the same time. And I think like I went on sort of my own healing journey. I did therapy, I did my own healing tools and techniques, I did some EMDR. So, um, and then it really sort of hit like a crossroads, where in my professional career in theater, I started working on a project that was about trauma.
Whoa.
And then so through that process, I really realized like, oh, actually, like this is kind of what I'm being called to do is more work in the field of mental health and working with trauma and working with people's stories and backgrounds and, core wounds as opposed to what I had been doing, which I loved. And I'm still a creative person, but I just found that when those two things sort of came together, um, I found like a whole other reason to use my tools and skills,
Yeah.
which, yeah, became more of a calling to me. Yeah.
That's very cool as you're describing it. I'm kind of trying to picture it because, like you said, as you already and here that piece of work comes that is about trauma. The universe sometimes works in this mysterious. Not that I know how it works. I'm not proclaiming that, but
Yes.
it seems like when you're kind of attracting that because you're thinking about it, talking about it, like this is what you're kind of bringing with you now, and then boom, there's that piece
Mhm.
of work. And so
Uh-huh.
that's great because it has this hope, like you said, maybe that's what I'm called to do. But one thing is to say, oh, that's exciting. Another thing is, well, I have to repurpose, retrain, redo
Mhm.
my, like, not redo my life, but like there's a lot of changes that go around with this. Can you, like, how did that work for you?
Well, I mean, it was a process for sure. I mean, it didn't just happen overnight. I retrained, I went back to school. I did. And then, you have to sort of start over in a way, like and start from scratch because I had built a career in one industry and then now I have to start from scratch and,
Yes.
and build it again in a new industry. So it's definitely a transition and it's definitely taken time. Um, and it actually all happened over the pandemic. A lot of it happened over the
Okay.
pandemic. Like I had started the transition just before. And so in a way that also kind of gave me a lot of time and a lot of space, whether I wanted it or not, to sort of fill in that transition, like to
Yes.
take that time to do that. So yeah.
I think it happened for a lot of people, right? I've heard a lot of people kind of made that transition during the pandemic. Was it
Yeah.
scary? Was the transition? And how did you deal with that part? Well, because maybe there's a worry, like you said, I got to start from scratch. I built this, and now it's almost right.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always some anxiety and uncertainty when you're making a big shift and making a big change. I think for me, it was typically I'm not very, in my personality, I tend to be quite risk tolerant. Like, I started my theater company when I was like 25, like straight out of like school. And
Wow.
when I just jumped in with 2 feet, like had no idea what I was doing and just did it anyway. So I tend to be an individual who doesn't, yeah, risk and change are not super. I mean, they're always hard. That's not to say it's not
Yes.
hard, but it doesn't scare me the way that it can for some people. So I tend to be somebody that kind of just jumps into things with both feet and sees what happens. But I
Cool.
still think, there is uncertainty. And whenever there's uncertainty, there is an anxiety because we don't know. And the hardest thing for me and for most people is not knowing.
Mhm.
It's the outcomes of we don't know, right?
The uncertainty. Wow. Thanks for kind of sharing that. This is very cool. How you started at 25. That's what will stick. And I wrote it down. 25. I started a theater company. Let's see what will happen, right? And then
Yeah.
20 years later, so you've got that in you that maybe it's an entrepreneur or just risk taker, and maybe there's more, or let's say less comfort or less uncomfortable for you than it might be for somebody else to make a transition like that or start. But
Yes.
if somebody's listening right now to us, and maybe they are in a cross path like
Mhm.
you had a
Yep.
few years back, what would you tell them? Would you recommend, hey, eh, go with it, it's worth it, like make that change, whatever that might be?
Yes. I mean, change is difficult for a lot of people. And I'm no different. I think it's just that I have a little bit more tolerance for embracing the lack of security maybe, that comes with change. But I'm a big believer. I mean, nothing happens. No healing, no new things like growth, evolution, all of those things require change. So in some capacity, I'm a big believer in like brace change. It's happening. Like what's that quote? Like change is the one thing that's
Yeah,
constant or
correct.
something, like this. So it's like it's in every moment, whether we know it or not, change is happening. So the more that we can learn to embrace change, I think whether we're good with it or whether it's uncomfortable for us, the more that we can do it, I think the better off we're sort of be in navigating sort of life's transitions and the things that life will just throw at us.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Maybe talk a little bit about your clients. I mean, obviously without names, but just kind of experience working with
Mhm.
people. Like you mentioned that you've had some anxiety and maybe even depression and some of the work that you've done on your own. How are you seeing that in clients? Is it kind of similar what you're seeing with people that are coming your way, that it is common nowadays, anxiety, depression, and kind of these challenges, I guess. Is that common nowadays?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think primarily I have found, well, it's sort of my intention, not necessarily to, I've worked mostly with women who have some sort of history of sexual violence or assault or domestic abuse, that's sort of, as well as addictions, substance use or abuse. I feel a lot of times in my experience, trauma or childhood wounds and substance use or abuse, they kind of go hand in hand. So a lot of people will have those similar issues that are happening for them in their lives. And a lot of times those things manifest in different ways. And the ways that they manifest is in chronic stress, anxiety, depression, a lot of different ways that we cope with those very core wounds or traumatic experiences that we've had. So,
So you're working, but listening to you're working with some of the most difficult situations there. We talked about substance abuse. We talked about women, particularly who are experiencing some sort of or have experienced violence. It's sad to hear that this is still happening in 21st centuries, but I do know it happens, and some countries even much more than it is here. I guess at least so, right? So how are you dealing on your end with this? I'm taking a lot of like these are some heavy situations, right? Like people are going through some really, really heavy work that they need to go through. How are you not taking that with you? What work do you do to make sure that that's not affecting you, or is it even possible not to affect you?
yeah, I mean, I would say that it's not 100% possible for it to not affect you. I had a teacher and an instructor who said he was like, "Oh, and he's been working for a very long time, was like, I thought it wasn't affecting me at all." So then he went through his whole own experience with this. And what he realized in the process of all of that was like all of these clients and that he had worked with, sort of wounds and things and
Yes.
traumas that he was holding of all these clients that he had been working with came to the surface through this
Wow.
sort of psychedelic psychotherapy experience. So I think, and that was not conscious for
Hmm.
him. So I think it's impossible to say that it doesn't affect
Yes.
you. I think that's impossible. But I will say that I think because of my own experience, my own healing journey, I've become really good at self-care. Like I've had to learn to take care of myself
Yes.
and what I need to do to take care of myself. And so that is what I do. Those are the things that like I make sure that I do so that I can be, my best self for these clients, and then I do what I need to do to then also try to release it or try not to carry it with me
Hmm.
as best I can. So I
Yes.
think that in some ways, like, again, like my experience has provided me or allowed me to have like quite a big container for these these things that these hard, very difficult experiences that people are going
Yeah,
through.
absolutely. You said it. We are humans. It will, but having that hygiene, personal hygiene, when it comes to that is so important. And it sounds like you're doing it right. But if I was to switch the question just a little bit, when a woman comes to see you, or maybe even
Mhm,
with the women and the clients at large that are coming to see you,
mhm.
and you're seeing these horrible things that they're going through in their personal life, right? Does that make you say, "Oh gosh, I'm starting to kind of give up on humanity in a way that these things are happening," or on the contrary, you go, I'm even more motivated to make a difference, to bring what these women need in their life right now? Does it motivate you or does it discourage you, I guess, in a short way?
It motivates me. It motivates me because I have a core belief that like everybody that we are all possible of change and growth and kindness and compassion and healing and all of those things. It doesn't discourage me. It makes me want to, yeah, it motivates me to work with people and see the best in people and not necessarily have cynicism that people don't change. I believe that it's
Mhm.
possible. So, and that healing is possible. Um, so yeah, no, I can understand how it can get you discouraged, but it really motivates me and I try to hold
Wonderful.
on to hope.
Wonderful. And maybe this is kind of speaks to the person you are, because some people would get discouraged, right, from seeing all that. So good for you for getting further motivated, because community needs people like you, especially within the where you work with women. As I said, it's very unfortunate that these things happen. There is a reason why they happen. I don't believe that for the majority of those cases, a person says, "Oh, I just want to purposely do harm for this person just for the joy of it," right? It's a complex situation, complex issue,
It is.
so it needs wonderful humans and professionals like yourself. The more, the better, really. But maybe it's a good segue to get into, maybe talk a little bit further now about mental health, and maybe why are some of these things, and is the talker, the inner voice, involved in any possible way?
Mhm.
And what can Sabrina maybe share with us on that topic? So the first question on in that second part is, when I say that talker, inner voice, the doubts, the
Mhm.
judgment, what comes to your mind, Sabrina, about it?
Yeah, well, what comes to my mind is just that inner voice, that inner critic, the as you calling it, the talker that we all have, right? I don't think there's one person that exists that doesn't have it. I mean, it's
Agreed.
part of human consciousness that we have it,
Sadly,
but we have
sometimes, yeah.
evolved to have that.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I guess, but so yeah, so that's what comes to mind is and it's just and I think part of it is like having awareness that it is actually just a part of us.
Yes,
Yeah.
the awareness piece. We're gonna talk a lot about it. But I just because I wrote down, said everybody has it, and I totally agree with you. The different intensity, obviously, and at different periods for sure.
Yes.
But in your experience, that seems to be the case and true for all the people you see. Everybody carries one of those, the talkers.
Yes, we all have an inner narrative yeah, and whether that is I think where it goes wrong is when we don't have awareness that that's not who we are. Like it gets blended with our identity of like who we think we are. So when we don't have awareness that it's actually just like a separate part of ourselves, like that it's a voice that's just talking at us. And then secondly, that from lot of people where the issue comes in is that voice is a voice of negativity. It's not helpful and it's not useful. And so it's learning to work with that voice in a way that's that maybe can be more constructive and helpful.
I totally agree with you. You brought the fact that awareness is a big part of it, right? Like
Mhm.
first, I guess probably the first step, awareness. Can we talk a little bit more about it? Why is it important, and what does it actually mean to be aware about it?
Yeah, as I was saying, it's that blending of when we have our narrative or our thoughts and we aren't aware that that's not us. That's not like the core of who we are. We think that whatever that narrative or whatever those thoughts are truth, right? The awareness piece comes in when we can sort of separate those two, when we can learn that like my thoughts are not who I am. And that's, that's kind of where all like mindfulness
Yes.
and all of this sort of contemplative or meditative practices come into to play as well. Recognizing, oh, that's a thought, that it's might not be true, and it could be false, and it doesn't really mean necessarily have to mean anything about me or who I am.
Wow, beautiful. Okay, I need to make more clarifications here. So what I heard you say, and I think it's
Mhm,
super important. I totally
mhm.
agree, and I'm playing kind of here silly for a little bit because I want to make sure that this is understood. So it's not
Yes.
about awareness of the fact that I am having this narrative. It's not just the awareness that there's a voice in my head. That is one type of awareness. But the next level, more important, is the awareness that that voice isn't who I am.
Yes.
Right? It's not just
Mhm,
that, oh, I have voices like telling me
mhm,
this and that narrative about whatever. That's
mhm.
awareness one. But the second one is that's not me. And that's important is because if I do think it's me, if I don't doubt that it's me, which I went through, Sabrina, for a long time in my life, which is what prompted
Mhm,
me to do this podcast, is I didn't
mhm.
make a difference between that negative voice, the critical voice, and who I was.
Yes.
Which meant I believed everything he said because if I don't doubt that it's me, then that must be saying the truth, right? It's me.
Yes.
Did I capture it kind of when what you were saying?
Yes, exactly, exactly. That's exactly it. If you Yeah.
Okay. So making that awareness though took me a long time. I have to admit. Like, well,
Yes.
okay. Sorry, I step back. The fact, look, or the process when it happens, it's instant. Right? It's a aha moment almost.
Exactly.
But getting to that aha moment,
Mhm,
well, in my
mhm.
case, it took 30 some years, right?
Mhm,
And some days
mhm.
I still fall for it, right? Obviously.
Yes.
Um, but for some people, it might take 50. And I've heard teachers or gurus, so to speak, say that
Mhm.
it may not happen in a one lifetime. You may not wake
Yes.
up from it. So why is it taking so long? One, and two, what can we do to kind of prompt either myself or somebody to say, "Hey,
That's a very good question.
I realize it's a big question, but I mean,
I guess my immediate thought goes to a little bit about what we were talking about, because it's really hard to awareness requires you to stop.
it's a good word,
Yeah,
right?"
it requires you to stop. It requires you to pause.
Hmm.
It requires you to like take a breath. It requires stillness. It requires silence. And those are all things that if we have trauma, childhood wounds, experiences that are hard, that are painful, that are intense, that are overwhelming, that are all of those things, we don't want to do any of that. Right? We don't want to stop. We don't want to be silent. We don't want to pause. We don't want to, none of that. So I think,
Well, is
that,
it fair to say, and I approach to these things that
yeah,
you just mentioned, the talker hates that, right? Pause,
exactly.
breathe, rest, right? Awareness. That's like,
Yeah,
it's the opposite. It's kind of like the antidote, right? It does not like this.
exactly. Exactly. It does not like that. It will. And so yeah. So I think that's why it depends, because it really requires those things. So if somebody has a really strong talker, or which is generally like proportional to whatever it is that is underneath all of that, it requires a lot. It requires a lot of stopping and doing all of the things and pausing and breathing and all of those things, yeah, that the talker doesn't like. And so somebody might go like, that's too much, whether that's conscious, that they're probably not saying that to themselves,
Mhm.
but it's just,
Yeah.
yeah,
It feels
yeah.
like there's two competing, I don't know if priority is the right word, but the talker agenda is noise, noise, drama. Like I'm staying alive. If
Yes.
I'm speaking out of my talker's viewpoint, the louder it's happening, the more drama and negative narrative I can stir, the louder I would
Mhm.
be, the longer I would exist in a way. Like I'm active, right? Where
Yeah.
from your perspective, what we are saying here is from peace, presence, being grounded, maybe what comes out in the presence when the talker is not? Is it a spirit? Is it a being? What is it that feels so good when the talker is silenced?
Well, goodness, another good question. Um there are a lot of words that we can use to describe it, I would say.
Hmm.
But in the context of what we're talking about too, I would say that it's like an essence or like a truth. It could be self, some people refer to it as like the self, the core self. It can be like, it could be soul if you're spiritual. It can be consciousness if like, I feel like there's many words for
Many.
it,
Yes.
but it's sort of like, yeah, myself, I always like I kinda do this action that I'm doing right now. It's very like a centered place of like truth and wisdom and that core knowing or core essence.
I love it. I love the word truth because it's the exact opposite of the talker, because most of what the talker says, it's really often not true. And maybe it was true at some point in the past, a part of it,
Mhm.
but it
Or
isn't necessarily true right now. But truth that has no opposites, right? Whatever truth is, it has no opposites and it feels good. That's how you know,
Mhm.
because it feels
Yeah.
centered, like, and this is a good way to show it. It feels centered, it feels right, and it feels home. That's another word I like to describe it.
Yes, that's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
like you feel like you're at home in yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
There's no way you want to be when that feeling is there.
Yeah.
You are fully content here and
Yes.
now. Where earlier, where you were saying it can be so uncomfortable to stay in peace because there's so much pain and unresolved, or yeah, I guess that's a good word to say, unresolved or unhealed. Maybe that's a better word.
Yeah.
Trauma and emotions that no same person wants to stay with pain. That's not a conscious choice you want to make, right?
Exactly, exactly. So at first, the truth is often that painful thing that we don't want to sit with, because like you said, no people rationally we're like, we gravitate to pleasure, right? We don't want
Yeah,
to sit with pain.
correct.
That's not something we want to do.
Yeah. So we can't blame us, right, for making
No,
that choice, right? And
no.
I'm sure that's kind of part of your work, because I've heard a lot, the 20th century motivational speakers, and I'm not going to say name those popular guys. Say, yeah, be strong and go at it and get up and don't worry and like you don't be weak. I don't think that's what you want to hear in these moments, because you already are feeling crappy, right? And somebody tell you you're weak for feeling that way, that's not working. I know from my
Mm,
experience, right?
no, no. To me, that's the opposite of what's helpful. In my own personal opinion. Yeah.
Sometimes I joke with my wife is that our kids or maybe our grandkids will look back at this so-called, and again, I'm not going to say the names, but these big motivational speaker names that we all recognize. And we're going to laugh at that, just kind of how we laugh at why doctors were promoting cigarettes or things like that for pregnant, like back in the day. This is
Yes.
exactly what we're going to say about this yelling at your face motivational speaker, get up. Like, that's not how you
Yes.
heal, right? This is not how you heal.
No.
It's just like, I'm very comfortable going on record because I know it doesn't work from personal experience, right?
Yes.
But if we go back, I mean, okay, so we recognize, oh, here's a talker now, yapping and yelling, there's pain. But when I was born, 1 day old, right?
Mhm.
And again, I know I recognize some of these topics and questions that we have. This is not exact science. There's so many ways to look at this.
Yep.
I totally understand this. But when I'm born, presumably I don't have a talker, right? I can't even speak. So there's no thoughts in my mind, right? So how come then 20 years later, I've got this insane critical voice in my head? Like, what happened between 0 and 20 that I now have this?
Yes. Well, I mean, I think part of it is that, I mean, there's a whole, right, like childhood development is a whole, that's a whole topic and it's very long and
Hmm.
complex. So it's hard to distill it down, but I would say the Coles Notes version is that, over time, as you'll see, like, I have nieces and nephews, our friends that have kids and all of these things, is that around a certain age, kids start to have self-awareness. So prior to that, we don't have like that's why often like if we're talking about young kids, they call it like pre-verbal trauma because you're not talking. Like you have there's not a conscious awareness of like me versus, my friend or my mom or my sibling. And so it sort of happens layer by layer of we hear different voices. So like our parents, right, are very
Loud.
yeah, like those are the voices that we hear at first, and then and we start to internalize that. So, essentially it gets like what I often refer to, or what people refer to as like an internal blueprint. That blueprint gets like built over time, starting like from the moment, well, even before you're born. And it just builds like, you have your parents' voices, and then you have your siblings' voices, and then you have all these other voices that are joining in. You go to school, you have teachers, you have friends, all of these things that by the time you're 20 or 18 or adult or even teenager, right? There's a lot of talking going on when you're a teenager. That it's an accumulation out of all of those sort of experiences that we've had that have told us who we are and who we should be and how we should act and what is right and what is wrong and all of that. And so it kind of, and then each experience sort of has its own lens and its own shape to it. So that over time, by the time you're like 20, 25, was when your brain is fully developed, that talker has a real way of knowing exactly what to say to you to make you like,
Yeah. Well, it seems to me it's
or whatever.
yes. It seems to be like what we are talking about here, like the way you describe it. I can't help it but say, well, it's an important, since it's so important of how we feel and how we show up for life and what we do. It's obvious that it matters how this
Mhm.
talk is developed, right?
Yes.
Are we missing a big part here to do something about it? Like it affects our lives 110%, and often not in a good way. Like not always, but
Mhm.
often it's not a helpful way. W-
Mm.
I didn't get any of this training. If there was, I missed it all through, whether it's school or like as a child at home. What are we missing there, Sabrina? It's an important piece, and yet we're not addressing it. I don't think early on.
Yes, absolutely. For kids, it's really important that yeah, and I think it's just that like a lot of this knowledge and this understanding is also what we have to realize only fairly recent. It's
Yeah.
only within the last 20, 30 or so years that we're really sort of getting into an understanding of how this all works in terms of, and especially like it with my specific background in training with trauma, like and understanding like how childhood experiences, I mean there's a whole study called the ACEs, right, which is about adverse childhood experiences, about how what happens to you throughout your childhood really informs how you navigate life as an adult. And so I think part of it is that we're all still learning, right? So, but for kids it's really important to have them like if in every school they were instituted some kind of like mindfulness practice where especially today
Mhm.
with phones and all of the screens and all of the distractions that kids have, that if it was instituted for all kids to just learn like mindfulness and then on top of that, like emotional awareness, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
how to stop and how to breathe and how to focus and how to pay attention to your body and how to
Yes.
understand what your feelings
Yes.
are. Like
Sign me up.
you will
If
be
I
setting kids
Yes,
up for so much more success.
yes, 100%. Sign me up. If I go back in time, I'll be sign me up, right? Well, because it seems like I agree with you 100%. If I'm 20, if I was just putting this right now at age 20, and somebody says, "Here, this is your talker," right? Like I don't have a
Mhm,
talker, let's say, and it's like, here's your
mhm,
talker. I think a good question would be like, well, why? What is it in? Like, why do I get this? Right? Do I have a say in this?
mhm.
But this is happening now for us. We don't have a say in it. At 20, you have it. It's been developed. And at that age, it's now a lot more challenging, not impossible, like you say. We go through
Yes.
change, and luckily so, we are able to, but it takes a lot more work.
Mhm. It does. Yeah. It's not by any stretch of the imagination easy. Yeah.
So if parents are listening to us right now who are about to have a
Mhm.
child or who have a baby, a young, beautiful baby, what would you
Mhm.
tell them right now as an advice when it comes to preparing their health to be, as you said, emotionally resilient, in better emotional state or mental health when they grow up? What is important for them to do or not do now as parents?
Honestly, the first thing I would tell parents is to do your own work,
Fair enough.
because so much of what we have been passed down to us as like in my
Mm-hmm.
life has been unconsciously given to me by my parents, right?
Yes.
Or by my caretakers or
Mm-hmm.
my elders,
Mm-hmm.
teachers, whoever. And it's because they never dealt with their
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
So I think where it starts, a lot of it is is with yourself.
Yes.
So, if as parents you start to do some of that work yourself so that you understand your talker, you understand how to regulate your emotions, you have emotional awareness, you have an understanding of what your wounds are and what you're reactive about, because we all are, right? We all
Yeah.
have them.
Yes.
And how to navigate that for yourself, I think it becomes a lot easier than for you to pass along the tools to your kids.
Yes, 100%. So I guess if I can link it back to the very first question I asked you,
Oh,
can you
girl.
be a good practitioner without necessarily having fixed your trauma? If you have, most of us have some. It's the same thing with parents, because in a way, parents are practitioners, if you wish, right,
Yes.
to your kid. But most importantly, I can say 100% because I have a child and another one on the way. They don't
Yeah.
listen to what you say, but they definitely copy what you do.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And so when you do your own work for yourself, then you're modeling for kids who exactly that's how they learn. They absorb by seeing what you do and how you are. And so if they see you doing all of those things for yourself, they're going to grow up knowing like, "Oh, that's what I do for me too."
Yes, yeah, 100%. And you said something very important. Like I want to go back to how, the grandparents passed it to the parents and then passed it to you, and, and obviously generations from
Mhm.
beginning. And then
Mhm.
my parents, like, I mean, as a child, the unconscious layers that they put on me, whether it was when I was beaten up or by my dad, because that's how they raised kids there. If you don't listen, you get smacked, right? Like it's
Yep.
just how it was.
Yep.
And that was the norm, I guess. And then your mom with conditional love, if you don't do this, you don't get to eat that, or you don't get a hug from me, or right. And when I later became a parent, now knowing the effect of this behavior have on a child, right? I
Mhm.
interrupted this.
Yep.
I didn't do that for my kid, right? I've never touched my kid physically, right? I've never done this conditional love. You know, you can earn my love if you do this, right?
Yep.
I know I'm sure I've done a lot of other unconscious things, but I know those two are interrupted. So is that the process of evolving this emotional well-being for us humans, for parents to interrupt this generational unconsciousness? Do you know where I'm going with this, or Sabrina?
Yes, 100%. I do think, again, sort of in the line of like what my main focus is really working with trauma and all of its layers. And there is part of trauma which, is technically like science is called epigenetics, which
Mhm.
means that like we all have certain genes and our different experiences will sort of turn on certain genes. And what's been shown of that, which is also called like intergenerational trauma.
Mhm.
So there's been lots of studies done in particular with, through World War II and with the Holocaust, and how like certain trauma has been passed down through generation, even if you're not aware of it, that this anxiety that somebody has stem from, the wounds and the
Mhm.
travesties that happened to their ancestors. So that is definitely part of it. And then also just like these burdens that we carry, and some people refer to them as legacy burdens. You can refer to them as like heritage burdens or lineage burdens, but it's also like just in behavioral patterns about like what you're talking about. Like if somebody, this is why abuse gets, generation upon generation will have issues with addiction or substance abuse or different kinds of physical abuse, or patterns get repeated, and they get repeated until somebody interrupts the pattern.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, and powerful. And I think we as parents, I mean, that's probably one of the most important role we will play besides providing for our safety and security. But that interruption of intergenerational improvement, I want to call it, like we have a
Yeah.
role to play, right? Switching just a little bit, I want to
Yeah.
ask you one question that's been percolating. On an average, if you had to sum up what most commonly the talkers of your clients say, what would that be? That one line?
Ooh. In one form or another, whether it uses this exact words, it's "you're not good enough."
Yeah, I hear that a lot. So, why is that such a profound and common statement that we say to ourselves, Sabrina?
Well, for so many of the reasons that I have just mentioned, we hear different voices and have different experiences over our lifetime, and especially like in early childhood and then adolescence, where we've had experiences where whether or not again those exact words have been said to us, but we've been told that something we did was not good enough,
Yeah.
or we did something wrong, or we made a mistake, or
Mhm.
and we hear that narrative over and over and over again so much that by the time we're in our 20s or whatever, that just becomes like
Yes.
all we hear all the time. You're not good enough
It's
in
very
some
sad.
form or another.
Very
Yeah.
sad because I heard it all the time and I know how it affects my life. But I don't speak cat, but I don't see cats going around the streets telling themselves, a cat, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. It seems to be a human illness. And
Yeah.
it's fair to say that since that's what you hear from your clients, and I've heard from other professionals, kind of the same, some similar statement. What can we
Uh-huh.
tell for people listening to us that may have the same statement going on, narrated in their mind?
Oh, goodness.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a hard one because this is where compassion comes in, I feel. Um, it is really hard to receive. Like if your talker is really strong and it's saying to you all the time that you are not good enough, and I come along as a practitioner, or even, you have friends, family in your
Mhm,
life, and I say to you, you are good enough no
mhm.
matter what, like you are good enough, that doesn't mean that
Nope.
you receive it or
No.
hear it. And so that comes down to sort of a lot of the crux of like, yeah, the tools and techniques that you start to have to put into place to just, to interrupt that voice or
Mhm.
start to make it a little less quiet, make it quieter, or yeah, different things.
So what I
Because it's not easy, right?
no,
If that's what you hear, it's not you can't just say, "You're wrong, I am good enough." Like, that doesn't change it.
doesn't change it. You're right, because it doesn't mean if somebody else tells you outside, you're gonna listen to the voice inside, sadly, that and kinda I did that, ignore the outside people telling you the opposite. But I know it's difficult and you have to work on it. That's what I'm hearing from you. But what is one thing that we can do? Is there a simple tool that we can employ at home right now to start alleviating this negativity that's coming down from the talk? If we could pick one.
If I could pick one thing, I would often the place that I start with clients is just to notice, because if you, like we just said, you can't just receive. Like if you're not, it's not like, again, like I could say you're good enough, you are enough in this moment, and they're not going to receive that, right? Because exactly, the talker is so strong and has been around for so long telling them that they're not good enough. My first step would be to go back to our very first beginning of the conversation, is just to start to notice that when that's happening, and try to not add extra judgment to it. Because here's what happens, right? We have the talker, it's going, "You're not good enough," or "You got to do this," or it's saying all this stuff. And then we get frustrated at ourselves
Yes.
because we add frustration to frustration, right? It just compounds the fact, because we're like, "Why do we have this talker? And why won't it be quiet?" And it's just like, it compounds it, right? Because
Yes.
it's already talking at us, and then we're talking at it, and it's just like all this noise of frustration that's not helpful.
Mhm.
So my
Agree.
first thing often would be just to notice and not add to it.
Like a passive exercise. Like you just notice. You know, the way you're describing and we're laughing about it, and I know it's not funny when you're experiencing it, not funny at all. But if
No.
somebody was to see us from the, let's say, extraterrestrials or from other planets, and they see us and they can see the thoughts, it's like a theater. Going back to what you did for 20 years, like what are these people doing to themselves, right?
Yes. And I think that that's so two things. Like, I think I said this before too. And then also to notice and then also then be like, that's just a part of me. So, there's a whole system of tools in parts work that you can use, but also to separate it from self, right? Like, cause it blends, right? It blends into who we are. So if there was two things that like I would offer right away is one, just to notice. And then as soon as you notice that that's not me, like that's just part of me. That's a voice that I'm hearing. That's just part of me. It's not all of me, right? So by actually noticing, you're kind of already distancing it from yourself as well, because you're starting to unblend the two a little,
Yes. Wow,
if
how
that makes
beautiful.
sense.
It makes perfect sense. I don't think I can say that any better. The mere act of noticing, it starts to create this distance, like you said. And why this is important is because it establishes the feeling of you. When you start noticing, there's a space and you start to
Mhm.
feel what you are without the noise,
Yeah.
even if it's for, like you said, short period of time. And
Yeah.
it might not be ideal because there will be pain. The talker won't let go right away, right? Not only not right away, it could take years at times, right? And then the pain might be there with you, like you said, the trauma, the layers, right? They don't
Mhm.
just disappear, but you start to create this. The noticing starts to create space
Yes.
where you can start appearing. That's how I envision,
Yes.
visualize it.
Yes, totally. 100%. Yeah.
And then it's magical. The healing, and I feel like only then some sort of healing can begin,
Yes.
right? One day is that.
Yep.
But if you're fighting with it, like you were describing earlier, adding to it, you will never win. You'll never, I don't think anybody has ever won arguing with a talker, because talker is often insane and it's not reality. So you can't fight with something that is fiction of your imagination, really, when it comes down to it,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So can I ask you, talking about noticing, when did you first notice yours? Do you remember?
Oh, probably like, I mean, if I like in reflection, probably like 16, 17, somewhere around there. Like,
Mhm,
I mean, I probably had it earlier than that,
mhm.
but like if I'm thinking back,
Yeah.
somewhere around there, in the essence where like I started to think of my like causing problems,
Okay. Yes, when it
Yeah,
now becomes
where it would tell me things about myself, right? That you aren't necessarily true, but that you would believe at that time.
okay.
So I think definitely like adolescent, like it might have been earlier, like 13, 14 maybe, but definitely by 16 or like right in that area of that's quite hard for a lot of people.
Mhm.
You definitely, or I definitely noticed, right? A lot of it. Yeah.
Agreed. And that's a tough age there. Like, there's lots happening in the mind, right? The teenage.
Yes.
But is that when you realized there's a voice, or that's when you noticed, hmm, is that me? Is that when you start to question that for you?
When I started to question, is that me? Or like, is there like when did I sort of start to maybe separate the
Hmm.
2? That's probably like much later.
Hmm.
Yeah, maybe like mid-20s maybe.
Yeah. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
around there where I started to be like, "Oh, like this voice is not helpful. This is not helping me right now."
Yes. Yeah. That's common. I think it happened to me in late 20s for sure. I don't think in the teenage during that period I was conscious enough or wise enough maybe even to make that distinction and say, hey, there's a separation. Yeah, I knew there's
But you
overwhelming.
could hear it.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Um but yeah, that aligns. When it comes to your clients, maybe one last question to your clients.
Mhm.
How do you, I mean, when clients come to you and they have not met this separation, right? Like it's
Yep.
happening. How do you help them? I mean, I know we've talked about it, but to recognize their voice from the voice of the talker and the trauma. Is it a process that like takes different techniques you explore based on where the client are? Is there one thing you always do? How do you approach this situation?
I don't really have like one set of standard like protocol. I really like every client is different, so I treat it differently. But I would say if somebody, and I've had clients like this who have a really tough talker, tough inner critic that's just always with them all the time. And I really start with exactly with what I sort of said to you. I start with very much of very simple um tools, because you can't just hand somebody like
Mm-hmm.
a big a big technique or tool, or like it's too overwhelming. A
Yes.
lot of times when like clients that I work with have, as we talked about, a lot of a history that's very difficult, and you can't just like open that up all at once.
Yeah.
So I start with just very simple tools, and sometimes, especially as we were saying, to stop and do those things like stillness, breathing, any of that is too much to
Mm-hmm.
ask of people, some people. So it really just starts with just noticing. It
Yeah.
starts with noticing, and it starts with compassion. I often say like that, be kind to yourself. Like, be
Yes.
kind to yourself. And when you hear, like, if all of that noise is happening, just take a moment and be kind to yourself. Like, tell yourself that what you're going through is difficult, that
Mhm.
you showed up, that you're showing up here, and give yourself some compassion to know that, like, that we all have it, and that that's okay, and that there's nothing wrong with you. And it's really just starting with like might seem very simple, but starting there of like, nothing is wrong with you. It's not broken. We all have it. Be kind to yourself, show yourself some compassion. And even that can be hard, but
Wow.
yeah.
I'm just listening and I get goosebumps because kindness, compassion, I'm just kind of reiterating for everybody who's listening is so powerful and so important. And I know, I mean, my personal observation is that when that voice is so common in like the narrative, it's really difficult to love yourself and be compassionate yourself because all you hear is that
Yeah.
you suck, right? So it's
Yes.
hard to love somebody who sucks, is what
Yes.
you believe, right? To be the truth.
Yes.
But it's so powerful to start to initiate that, the noticing, then the compassion, the kindness,
Yeah.
because in the moment of it, of these storms, the last thing we want to do is be kind of unkind to ourselves, which you often do, because that
Exactly.
makes it. But thank you, Sabrina, for bringing that up, and hopefully people call that to be kind, compassionate, and say to yourself that that's not just me. It's not me being wrong and everybody's figured it out. We're all in it together. And I would add, I look for help. There's a lot of amazing individuals like Sabrina who've dedicated their life
Mhm.
to helping. So it's never too late, and you don't have to wait for a storm. Like it's like going to the gym, right, Sabrina? Like do it often and
Mhm.
at any time.
Mhm. It's a practice. It really is. Yeah.
Can I ask you
Supporting your mental health and wellness should really be like a daily practice for all of us.
two last questions because we promised an hour and we're just about that. One was kind of hypothetical. If we humans didn't have that negative talker, what would the world look like?
I don't know. I mean, I would love to believe in like euphoria and like that the world would be a kind and peaceful and empathetic place.
Is it possible? I know it's hypothetical, but like, do you think that's a possible future for humanity?
Oh my gosh, because like, here I am,
Yeah.
the one that's being like hopeful. Like I'm hopeful and I don't get discouraged. And so I don't want this to come across in a like, because I am a hopeful and encouraging person, but my answer to that would be no.
Wow. Yeah.
Because I think, and this goes into a little bit of philosophy and sort of my own personal beliefs, but I think that like struggle is part of the human experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think
Fair.
that's kind of part of the experience, and the part of the reason for us to be here is to learn and grow
Fair.
and evolve, and inherent in that is some kind of struggle. Now, could we all be kinder and more loving and more hopeful towards each other as we struggle?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do I think there are better ways of being in the struggle together?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love your
Yeah.
answer. I love your answer. Last landing question. Did you ever, before I get to it, did you ever name your talker? By the way, because some people do. I don't know if you ever had a name for your own talker.
No, I mean, I never had a name for it, I never called it anything. Now I often refer to it as like monkey,
Monkey
my
brain.
monkey, yeah, my monkey noise, my monkey mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if that monkey mind that I call the talker was an actual real human being standing right now, in front of you right now, what would you tell her or him?
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, I would this is gonna go back to my own, like, philosophies and techniques and tools. When if I am having an encounter with my talker, I will say, "Thank you." I will say, "Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. I hear you, but right now you're not being useful to me, and I'm gonna ask you to take a step back."
How powerful. Beautiful, beautiful, Sabrina. We covered a lot of different, and I know because it's a mental health it affects every part of our life, literally. Is there anything that you feel like we didn't touch on or you'd like to leave the audience with?
No, I mean, I think we talked about a lot, that was good and helpful and interesting, and I guess, the only thing I would leave the final note would be is just that, um, yeah, that we all have some version of the talkers. To not feel alone in that and to, not feel like you're broken or that something's wrong with you because we all have it.
Beautiful. Thank you for leaving us with that. It was an enormous pleasure. Sabrina, words are not enough to describe what a great conversation I had with you, how I felt, what great thoughts we shared, and some truths about our true self. Thank
Mhm.
you for being our guest. I hope to see you again in the future in a part two where we can even kind of point it in a direction that is more specific. But we covered quite a lot today. It's an enormous pleasure. Thank you for being our guest, Sabrina.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it was a great conversation. I enjoyed it immensely. And I'm happy to continue the conversation at any time in the future as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Mind Tribe. Share it or leave me a note. Remember, your talker isn't you, presence is. Less talker, more presence. See you next time.